perversely immoral? Is it criminal? Meaning, the moment that you have this information and you can present this information, there are real world consequences. Like, there are people who are going to have some kind of degenerative illness. There are going to be people, like you said, with boils and skin rashes. But kids, I mean, there are kids growing up in this climate. And, the Republican Party, even Democrats, are going to be okay with putting these people in jail, missing the fact that these people were brought up in situations that they have kind of a depraved situation. The mental damage that takes place to the brain in regards to kids who are ingesting lead. Like, there are real world consequences to this issue. Is this criminal? Like, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is there some kind of legal mechanism that comes into place for people who are lying on a grand level like this? And if so, how do you get those processes enacted?
Yeah, it is criminal. The lead and copper rule, not to bore your audience, the EPA's lead and copper rule, which is the main drinking water regulation, says you have to test the water for lead. If you're doing it for the EPA's compliance, the water has to be totally stagnant for 6 hours, meaning don't use the water in your house for 6 hours, and then take the sample as a first draw, meaning right away. You turn the tap on, you put it in. If you were a state official who didn't do that and you ran the water, that is falsifying a federal regulatory test. It's a crime. So
did you speak to the EPA on this early on? You said you spoke to. Did you get across to them that they were effectively lying? I mean, it looks like the moment that information like this is revealed, at the very least, they would do some level of investigation to verify the results.
Oh, that's so cute of you to think that. I thought that too. I thought that too. The EPA, I was surprised in the first place. The EPA confirmed that this kind of testing is against protocol. Yeah. But now they are basically towing the line. And when I asked them, are you going to investigate the state's testing? Do you think they should reopen the water stations while this investigation goes on? They are towing the line that, the Flint is meeting EPA regulatory compliance, based on the numbers we have. And it's really important to point out, Jamarl, part of why the EPA is doing this is because we've had, frankly, cowardice politicians that haven't spoken up. We broke this story in November, right? Only Congressman Ro Khanna and Congresswoman and presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard have spoken out based on our reporting and called for an investigation. I happen to like her a lot, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this has been sitting in her office since November. I've spoken with her communications director probably 4 times. I've simply asked it for a tweet. Haven't gotten one. Same thing for Rashida Tlaib. Congressman Dan Kildee, who represents Flint, has not publicly said anything about this other than a boilerplate comment in our story. And this isn't about like placing blame on these politicians, but here's how, just so people know how politics and media work. Media coverage, the media doesn't really want to go out on a whim and cover something unless it's safe to, meaning, politicians are speaking out against it, or, people are already in an uproar. Yeah. So that's why we were trying to get Jen, my partner who helped me break this story, she was there with me knocking on all these doors. We must have sent it probably to every sitting member of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And maybe it's because we're not the New York Times and we're a small level startup. Maybe it's because, they're all very focused on the real national emergency, which is Russian Facebook pages. Maybe, who knows? Everybody's focused on whatever their hot issue is, but the EPA is doing nothing. The state environmental agency, Jamarl, and the governor, he's now the former governor, Rick Snyder, you know what their response was to what we found? Not knocking down our reporting, not saying we're lying, not disputing anything. They said the residents are confused.
Wow. They're confused about their water or about their injuries or their illnesses?
They're confused as to what kind of testing went on, and meaning they're confused with the residents telling us that state officials came into their home and ran their water first before testing. So you'd have to really be imagining that. You'd have to believe
all of them would have to believe that. Like, all of them would have to, like, that doesn't make sense. all of them would have had to had said the same thing and would have had to somehow work with each other or talk to each other, or they're trying to insinuate that you told them to say that. In either case, that's you're essentially saying the residence doesn't have any agency in this process. That's nonsense.
It's called blaming the victim, in my opinion. And your viewers will see from the documentary, we're premiering it Tuesday for everybody, April 23rd, but you could get it tomorrow as a status quo member. So really, in this documentary, it's overwhelming. We spoke with so many people. It's right there. We have all the interviews on audio, on video, so you could see we didn't prompt them to say it. And most of them, we didn't include residents who kind of like their memory was fuzzy. Yeah. But most of them were like, yeah, they ran it. It was just about remembering how long. So there's no confusion. You would have to imagine that. You'd have to believe that residents, all of them, just believe like ghosts came into their home and ran their water. And the problem is when corrupt people, meaning the environment, because it's not just Flint. There's been environmental agencies caught rigging testing and artificially lowering numbers, tossing out high tests. They did this in Detroit. They've done this in Philadelphia, whatever, because it's their motivation to get lower numbers, because if they get lower numbers, then there's no action that needs to be taken. Yeah, if you are above the EPA's action level, which is 15 parts per billion for lead, then there's remediation efforts, which cost money. And obviously it's all about the money. So really what it comes down to is, where is Chairman Elijah Cummings on this, right? He's done things on Flint. You know what his press secretary, in fairness to Cummings, he didn't say this, his press secretary said it to me. When I sent this to him, he says, yeah, we'll do some social media on this when the time is right.
When the time is right. Did you get this to other media organizations like MSNBC? They pretend, they're supposedly the liberal network. They're supposed to care about stuff like this. Or I know Fox is not going to care. Or the Young Turks or Democracy Now! Did you give it to any of these guys who are considered to be lefties or, the bastion of the left in regards to media?
How many hours do you have? Listen, I don't want to open up a war against media, but I will. So this was supposed to be published at first by Vice News. They killed it that week, basically not based on the story, but based on me and some things that happened in the past. Then we moved on to Newsweek magazine, which would have been a huge break. Yeah, it's pretty corporate, but it's still Newsweek magazine.
Yeah, it's still a massive magazine. Yeah. And by the way, Newsweek has broken some really good stories. They pulled the stuff on Obama and Syria. They've broken some stuff that has been somewhat edgy. So we worked with them for 2.5, 3 months. I worked to cut down the story, and the story was originally 10,000 words. We cut it down to like 1,500. Yeah, and really cut it down like for the ADD generation, online, because it's not super complicated, but does involve lead EPA regulations, this and that. They killed it the day before it was supposed to publish. Their words to us were, like in politics, when you're explaining, you're losing. What?
Meaning it was too complicated to explain the story. Well,
the story is not complicated. The story is pretty straightforward. You have the organizations within state governments. They have an incentive to keep their numbers down. They were exposed in a scandal that essentially showed that they had lead. And in dealing with the scandal, they wanted to try to get rid of the scandal and try to give this thing of saying, look, we're clear. And so they went about ways of deceiving the public in regards to the testing. I don't think the story is all that complicated at all.
Maybe you should run Newsweek magazine then, because apparently they did. And really what it comes down to, Jamarl, in my opinion, a lot of media organizations are spineless because they don't want to get sued. So when we had an in-person meeting with Newsweek, because what was so mind-boggling, a story that's not told, most of the media lives in New York and DC and only covers what they're interested in. Yeah. So I had to first explain to, I'm talking like senior editors at Newsweek, what has been going on in Flint since the water crisis, because they haven't been covering it.
They didn't know.
They knew like what originally happened, but they didn't know like the years since. So first it's like explaining what's been going on, because frankly, we've been the only ones covering it. Then once that was, they wanted to verify. So I said, go ahead and call. I'll give you the numbers to every person we spoke with. You could confirm it, because we did. It wasn't Newsweek who broke it. It was us. We were going to publish it through them. So they verified through several people that the same thing we verified. So at the last minute, they kill it. Could be for a lot of reasons. I don't know. But the reason they gave me is we didn't have enough data and it was too hard to explain. Well, when's the last time, Jamarl, you've seen corporate or independent media knock on 450 doors in a city?
Yeah.
When is the last time you've seen 150 residents on the record? We got 35 homes that had this illegal flushing. And yes, it is a crime. So it's just laughable that there was not enough data. But putting aside all that, and again, I like a lot of journalists there. The Intercept didn't even respond to me on this.
Really?
Democracy Now! We've been trying to get on there. No response.
That seems like it would be up their alley.
Yeah. In fairness, didn't send it to the Young Turks. So I don't know if they've covered it, but left them out.
Well, they covered it when you were there.
Right.
Only when you were there.
Right. And honestly,
not
out of bitterness, I just don't think they'll cover it. We've sent it to, I mean, Mother Jones passed. Daily Beast I met with in person. Originally they were interested, then they passed. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And the only thing I can think of, Jamarl, is this is the danger. People don't realize this because they don't work in media. This is the danger when the, quote, mainstream journalists are fixated on a revenue-generated, clicks-generating conspiracy theory and new Cold War reenactment. Because when that's all they focus on, and don't get me wrong, I read most of the Mueller report. There are things in there that are very scandalous. I mean, I don't see anything with collusion, but Trump is clearly, he's not so different than Richard Nixon. If any of this stuff was on tape with him dictating, he would have to resign. So he did obstruct justice. I think it's relevant and it should be covered. But my point is, I can't. There were news outlets that responded to my pitches saying, "Is this connected to Trump?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, no. This happened under Obama." So maybe if it got to the point where I was joking with Jen, like, "Can we find a Russia angle?"
Putin hacked something that did something that messed up the water. The